Are you an adventurer looking to take your hunt to the next level? Then you're in the right place. Welcome to East Meets West Hunt with your host, Beau Martonik.
Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of the East Meets West Hunt podcast presented by onX. The onX Hunt app is your number one mobile GPS hunting app that turns your smartphone into a mobile GPS. And that can be used with or without cell service anywhere in the field. And it's just a very good thing to be able to have the fact that you can go through, mark all your waypoints, you can scout online on your computer at home, and it automatically transfers right over to your phone, and you're able to use that at any time out in the field. So this time of year is especially important. I mean, I'm using onX just about year round, but this time of year is really important to do your pre-scouting, whether that's for whitetails, that's for elk, mule deer, or anything else that you're chasing after. The onX Hunt app can be a very valuable tool for that. So if you want to check out the app, if you head over to onxmaps.com and use the coupon code EMW, that'll save yourself 20% off of the app. And the University of Elk Hunting, so Corey Jacobson and Elk 101 have put together the most comprehensive elk hunting learning course available. And if you listen to the last podcast I did with Corey last week, you'll know that Corey is full of information and he definitely doesn't leave anything on the table here. He puts everything out there from the first planning phases all the way through gear, through elk calling, fitness, down to elk hunting knowledge, packing the game out, everything in between. And in addition to the membership, you get some deals and discounts on a bunch of elk hunting gear from the Elk 101 store and some of their partners. So go check that out over at elk101.com. And if you use the coupon code EastMeetsWest, that'll save yourself 20% off of the online course. And Tethered. So Tethered has developed the lightest weight, safest elevated hunting gear available, and in that being said, it's focused towards the saddle hunting community, which is a very niche community that up until just recently there wasn't a whole lot of innovative gear available, and Tethered is still the leader in that, with being able to come out with products that just work for you. I used the Tethered Predator platform, and now I'm using the Phantom saddle this year. I mean, both those combinations are extremely light, and it's just a very good tool to be able to use for mobile hunting. If you head over to tetherednation.com, you can not only check out their gear, but you can also learn about saddle hunting, as their number one goal is to inform people on it and some of the benefits of that. So head over to tetherednation.com and check that out. So last but not least, I have some news to give out here from our friends over at Maven. So Maven Optics, if you've been following along with the podcast for a while, or just even before the podcast myself, I've been using Maven Optics now for quite a few years. And Maven's a direct-to-consumer company, being able to come out with full lifetime warranty products, the highest-end optics at an affordable cost because of their direct-to-consumer business model. Well, they have just released their new Cs1 Spotting Scope. So if you're familiar, Maven has the S series and the B series in their binoculars, and now they have done that with their spotting scopes. So the B series, or and their spotting scope would just be the S series, is the top of the line. Everything is built to perfection, but that also comes a little bit of cost. Where the C series binos and now the spotting scope are kind of like their mid-level, where they're still using the highest end ED glass that you're seeing in their top end ones, but are able to add some different components in there to make them a little bit more cost effective and also lighter weight. So last year they came out with the S2 spotting scope that I used on my elk hunt, and they wanted something to kind of fill in the gap in between their products they already had out. So this one is a 15 to 45 by 65 millimeter spotting scope. So it's powerful, but yet still compact enough to be able to view out at a distance. And so it's just over 40 ounces and only 11.4 inches in length. So it's pretty light for what it is, and in a somewhat small package, but still gives you a pretty good field of view, scratch resistance, lens coating, and is of course waterproof and fog proof, as all their products are. If you head over to mavenbuilt.com, you can check out all of the information on this new spotting scope and get it in time before hunting season. If you use the coupon code EastMeetsWest-gift, then by using that, you get yourself a free gift with any full price optics order, and the gift can vary depending on what you get, but could get some cool stuff with that. So check that out over at mavenbuilt.com. All right, so on today's episode, I am joined by Trail Kreitzer from GoHunt, and Trail and I've been watching Trail stuff for a while from the videos, and I've been reading all the stuff at the GoHunt blog for forever now, it seems like, and I'm pumped to get him on the podcast and talking. So, we wanted to kind of take this down to the basics and talk about the basics of hunting elk, mule deer, and other big game, more or less like kind of an intro to Western hunting. But, so within that, we talk about the most important gear items, like where are you going to spend your money at, dealing with altitude, putting together a plan for an over-the-counter elk hunt, executing the plan when the first plan fails, getting over target panic, and then we also talk about Trail's first experience hunting whitetails as West meets East. And so this is a great episode for hunters wanting to head west for the first time, but also some information for experienced hunters as well. So a bunch of stuff in here, and Trail is always just a great guy to be able to talk to. So pumped for this episode and to get even closer, as next week I'm heading to Alaska. So just finishing up some stuff there, which seems like I never done with preparing for it and getting things together. Stress is stress and anxiety is definitely high, but with that being said, excitement definitely trumps that, and just can't wait. Already getting some texts from some of my buddies, Garmin Inreaches in the field that are hunting caribou currently. Got some people with some bulls down already, and it is just getting me fired up. So looking forward to that. But in the meantime, enjoy this episode with Trail, and if you like it, leave a rating and review over at Apple Podcasts or wherever you're listening to. Really appreciate that. Subscribe to the channel. It definitely means a lot. So thanks for listening, and we'll see you next week. All right, we're live. I am joined on the line here with a friend of mine coming from all the way across the country, Trail Kreitzer. How are you doing?
Good. How are you, man? How's things back there?
Pretty good. Did I pronounce your last name correct?
Yeah, man, nailed it.
All right, good.
That's a tough one. You worked on it.
I was like, I should have asked that ahead of time, but I've read the name a bunch in articles and stuff you've written and things, but it always seems to be pronounced a little differently than I think.
Yeah, you notice I didn't try your last name.
Yeah. Yeah. It's funny. My last name is pronounced Martonik, but yeah, I usually get Martonik, just about any different way you can put those syllables together and pronounce it. That's what I normally get, even with people that have known me for a long time. So
yeah. Kreitzer's a tough one. I get Chrysler. So kind of like a car, Chrysler, but you nailed it.
Yeah, you get an L thrown in there somewhere.
Mm-hmm. It's too tempting, when you've got Chrysler and you see Kreitzer, it's just like it's too tempting to throw that L in there and get Chrysler.
That's funny. Well, Trail, welcome to the podcast here. I'm pumped to get to talk to you. If before we get kind of rolling here, would you mind giving a little background on yourself? Kind of you work for GoHunt. Talk a little bit about that and a little bit kind of what makes you tick with hunting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I worked here at GoHunt. This is my third full year at GoHunt. I came on in 2017 in the spring, and I guess primarily as I came on, my job was kind of split between the insider portion of the website, and then we just barely started the gear shop. And so my job was kind of split between those two different factions. On the insider side of things, it's kind of transitioned to where I do a lot of the writing for the application strategy articles. So if you're a GoHunt insider, you'll see those come out typically about a month before the application deadlines across the West for each state and each species. And, those take a ton of time. I mean, I'm probably 350 pages, written pages every spring in, analysis and application strategy on different states and different species. So I write a bunch of those. And then on the gear shop side of things, I pick a lot of the gear, in conjunction with a bunch of the guys that work here. We're all kind of gear junkies, and we all kind of follow that stuff. And so that's kind of probably the other half of my job is I work in the gear shop and pick a lot of the gear, handle a lot of the customer service side of questions. So if somebody's looking for like a new backpack, or they want a recommendation on a boot or a tent for any given hunt, chances are they'll get a chance to talk to me and kind of help them, and hopefully I steer them in the right direction. So yeah, that's kind of my job at GoHunt, customer service. I don't know, I like to tell people I'm like a utility player here. I kind of do a bunch of stuff. So, so I live here in southern Utah. GoHunt has a little satellite office in southern Utah. There's a few of us that are just like holdouts that couldn't deal with the Vegas heat. So there's actually 4 or 5 of us up here in a little satellite office in southern Utah, which is, I don't know, probably 20 degrees cooler than Vegas, which is nice. So live here. I've got 3 boys. So my oldest is 15, which is hard to believe, hard to stomach. The other day he was asking me if we could start working on getting his learner's permit, which is just complete. I'm trying to wrap my head around that still. But and then hunting. I grew up in a hunting family. My parents originally moved out from Indiana. Ended out here in southern Utah, and my dad primarily moved out because he wanted to hunt the Intermountain West, and was just a big fan of the outdoors. The guy, he spent probably 10 to 20 days every year he would take off on his own and backpack hunt for deer, and even for elk when elk were. Elk are everywhere now, but back when when he was out here just with the Utah, they weren't hardly anywhere. So I was kind of, born and raised in it, and, I've hunted since I was a kid, started out deer hunting, and then kind of transitioned as elk got more prevalent here in Utah, started elk hunting. And, my background, my degree is in wildlife science, and I was a biologist for game and fish here in Utah for about 7 years before I came on to go hunt. But really, my love is just in wildlife and in hunting and being outdoors. And I've been fortunate that I've got a chance to hunt a bunch of different states. I've hunted almost every state in the West and Alaska a few times. And that's me in a nutshell.
Yeah, it sounds like you're definitely pretty busy in your role with GoHunt. And then I've followed along for the last couple of years, seeing some of the stuff you've been up to and a lot of the writing and everything. And if anyone hasn't checked it out. And I had Brady on the podcast here back in January, and we talked a little bit about GoHunt, but like the insider articles that you're writing there are just incredibly helpful. That's how basically I planned my elk hunts for the last few years, was solely using the GoHunt website from the standpoint of kind of figuring out where I was going to apply, and also just for the over-the-counter options, what that was going to look like. So it's been really helpful. Hopefully no one from work's listening, but if you look at my homepage when I pull up Google Chrome, it's one of the top 4 items there that I click on every day to check out the articles.
Yeah. you can kill time on GoHunt.com on your insider subscription. So like if you're a Western big game junkie and you're looking for hunting opportunities, you can definitely go down some rabbit holes and kill some time on your GoHunt Insider account.
Yeah, and one other thing you had said on that is just like being able to, the gear shop, which seems to be continually expanding, is nice because it seems like, it's a lot of hand-picked stuff from you guys, and which has some weight behind it as far as that, and being able to reach out with any questions. That's just huge because especially us, from the East that might not have grown up doing this style of hunting, and the gear can be kind of overwhelming at first. You're not sure what you need or what you want, and it's just I've definitely gone down the side of the gearhead side and have spent too much money on things that I probably didn't need to, but I love testing new stuff and trying new things for no reason. I came home today right before I got on the phone here, and there was a new sleeping bag at my doorstep. So yeah.
Right on. What did you get?
I got a Marmot. What was it? It's a synthetic bag I got for Alaska, the Trestles Ecolite. Yep. So I picked that up, 20-degree bag, and I pulled it out. And I was like, man, this does not feel like a 20-degree bag. So let's see.
Yeah. You may want to take some extra down layers just in case you end up huddled up in it, huh?
Yeah, that's it. Normally. I mean, I'd say normally. My other one that I ran is a Big Agnes bag. That's a 25-degree bag, and I always just have my my puffy jacket and pants that I'll wear inside it if it gets cold.
Yeah. No, you'll be all right. It's Alaska's crazy though. I mean, you can get all kinds of weather, especially it sounds like you're going in August. I mean, you can have daytime highs in the maybe 50s or 60s, and then you could have one of the worst storms you've ever seen roll in. So it can go either way. But one thing about it is you'll be up for an adventure.
Yeah, I'm really excited about that. It was funny when I was talking to the air taxi that's flying us in. I was like, I know that weather can be, it can be variable, but what can you expect? And it was actually the guy's wife, and she's like, oh, it's like 60s during the day and 40s at night. I'm like, I feel like it's a little more complex than that.
Yeah.
So
yeah, and if it's not, give it an hour, right? That's what they say in Alaska, right? Is it could be sunny and 60, and within an hour you can have snow falling and be sub freezing. So you never know.
Yeah.
I'm curious. I want to ask a follow-up question if you don't mind.
Go ahead.
Maybe I'll interview you a little bit, but it would be interesting to me. So you're relatively new, and I follow along with you as well. But so like once you started coming out west, I'd be interested. Like, was there a piece of gear that that you picked up or you bought that you came out that you either thought like, I wished I'd have done this differently, or was there a piece that you brought and you were like, yeah, this is a must-have for every Western big game hunter?
Yeah, so I say the biggest things for me were backpack and boots. I'd say like it was 2016 was the first year I went, and the first, I was like reading everything I could, and I was like, you need the most ultra lightweight stuff I could get, and I bought a backpack, and I don't even think they make it anymore, but it was a Kuiu Ultra 6000, and it was so light. They were running a Memorial Day sale. I got it for a great price, and the first day, I think it was the first day on the trip, I used it all summer, no problems. Well, I didn't really know any better because I didn't ever use any other type of pack like that. And I cinched down my bag and I tore it right down. I tore the fabric right down it when I cinched it tight. And then my cousin, who I talked to into buying the same exact pack, his main buckle on his hip belt broke. So it snapped one of the so he had it tied the rest of the trip, the rest of the 7-day backpack hunt, our first ever hunt like that. And so we had some issues there. So I was I learned that with that, at least with that model and stuff, I geared towards the side of a little bit heavier isn't bad if it's going to hold up. So
Yeah.
so I definitely
That's great advice.
yeah. And then oh, sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead. Sorry. I was just gonna say that's great advice. But I think a lot of people do get hung up on, like chasing that lightest weight option of any and all things. It's like it's great when it works. When it doesn't, it can just be a complete sufferfest. It's funny. I had the exact same backpack. I did a backpack hunt for elk in Wyoming, and I got a brother that lives up there that's a resident, so he was my my resident guide. And he and I backpacked into an area, and I killed a really nice bull. And coming out of there, I had that exact same pack. And mine stayed together, but I can tell you it definitely did not handle the amount of weight that I had in it well.
Yeah.
I know by the time I hit the trailhead, I was pretty well done with that pack.
Yeah, I've heard that even from some other people, similar thoughts on it. And the other thing that worked well for me actually was my boots. So I'd bought a pair of Loa Tibet, which I actually still own those boots, but they were really great. I wore them in and they fit my foot well, but I had heard of other people that had, some nightmare situations with it. So that was really good that worked out. And another thing that I still don't, you might be able to give some insight on this, but water filtration has been something that I've been trying different options. I still feel like I don't have the perfect option. I've used, and I still have it, and I had to buy some new filters, but the inline system or the gravity fed system, who makes that? Platypus. So I have that, and it works really good if I had clean water. But the one day in Colorado, I'd filled up basically out of a pond that was kind of like an elk wallow. It was disgusting water. I don't know why I did, because there was definitely options within a few hundred yards of there that I could have chose differently. But I remember my brother being like, those filters are like, they're good for X many thousands of gallons. They're made for anything. I'm like, okay. So I filled it up and it clogged that thing up so bad. So now I will use that. But I also either have the droplets, in my pack or the Asterapen that I keep as well.
Mm-hmm.
But
yeah, you're spot on. Those little inline filters have the little looped micro filters, and they're small and they work great when the water is relatively clear. But you're right. You get any kind of debris in them, they can clog up pretty quick. They can also freeze, which can be annoying if you're trying to use them in cold weather. But yeah, like some of the MSR, like I believe it's the Mini Works, some of those that you can actually have a ceramic filter that you can pump. So the Catadine Hiker Pro is another one. That you can actually pull out and eat clean. I mean, those are great if you're dealing with a lot of particulate in the water. Yeah, that's interesting. I think everybody's had that same struggle with the water filter. And I'm like you. I've gone to where I carry both. I'll carry a filter, whether it's like a Catadine Hiker Pro, but then I'll also carry some sort of way of purifying it, whether that's the Steri-Pen or the Aqua Tabs or last year I was in Alaska, and the guy I hunted with up there, he had this little thing called, it's a Rover Blue pen. It's a little ozone pen. And this thing's tiny. It's like the size of a writing pen, and it's a charge, so it's electric, charges up in no time at all. But you basically push the button, stick it down in the water, stir it around, and you can see these little ozone bubbles, coming off. But, yeah, we were drinking water right out of the river, just filling up our Nalgene bottles and then treating it with this ozone pen, and that worked awesome. So I'm a big fan of that thing.
Oh, that's interesting. That because I read so we're flying up to Alaska, and it's an unguided hunt, but flying with an air taxi that's going in, and they sent out like a recommended gear list, and they were like, oh, you don't really need to filter water, and I'm like, I still feel like I want to at some point. I don't want to ruin a hunt based on that.
Man, there would be nothing worse than getting all the way out there, in the middle of nowhere hunting caribou and get sick.
Yeah.
It just isn't worth it, man. I'd treat everything.
Yeah, that's kind of my plan. Were you hunting with Steve Opat?
Yeah. Yeah, I was. Steve?
Yeah, I do a little bit. So Heather introduced me to him as well as she introduced, us. And I talked to him on the phone last year for I feel like an hour or so, and then and we've talked a little bit since, but I actually need to get him on the podcast as well. Seems like lives a really cool life.
Yeah. Yeah. Steve's a good dude. And I met him, same thing. I met him through Heather a few years at the Western Hunting Expo, and just linked in with him. And he and I remember he and I just standing in the booth, shooting the bull, talking, different hunts and stuff. And I said, man, I'd always wanted to go on a moose hunt. And he's like, well, come on up, And I'm like, yeah, I just met the guy. But he was like, yeah, no, for real, come on up, And I think the next year I saw him again at the expo, and he's like, hey, I've got this spot, and I've been thinking about it, looked it on a map. He's like, would you be up for it? Do you want to do it? And I was like, yeah, sure. So, so we actually made plans, and that's the extent of me knowing him was, visiting at the Hunt Expo there in Salt Lake, and then. Yeah, he and I put together the trip and lumped on, but the first time that we'd ever, spent any real time together was, 9 days in the backwoods of Alaska. So, and it turns out that guy's like everything I thought he was, just a solid dude. Really a cool guy, really interesting, really passionate about hunting in the outdoors, and, lives an interesting life. And that was a fun trip. Yeah. Cool guy, Steve.
Yeah. Those shows are really cool for getting to meet, people like that. A lot of like-minded people that go through it. Western Hunt Expo has been one that I've had on my list. I don't know if I had plane tickets booked this year, or I was planning on, I was going to work the show for Heather, and then they decided they weren't going to go. And just, I need to get out there. I feel like would be a fun show to go to.
Yeah, it is, and it's grown so much. I would say, I don't even know how many years they've been doing it, but it just continues to grow. It gets bigger and bigger, and yeah, it's an awesome opportunity to kind of link in with people and meet new people, just like me meeting Steve. I've made a bunch of contacts there, so I would say, yeah, provided COVID lets us, plan on it in 2021.
Yeah, how about it? So it has. Well, actually, I want to before I ask you about your travel plans there, I want to go back and ask you the same question of what do you think the biggest gear items for, say, either someone new to backcountry hunting or just in general, some of the most important gear for you? Yeah,
I typically tell people, especially if they're coming from the Midwest or the East Coast and they're coming out, and whether they're coming on an elk hunt or a mule deer, antelope hunt, for example, is a great entry hunt into Western big game. I typically tell them, after your weapon, whether that's your bow or your rifle, and then your permit, I think probably the next and most important item is optics. So, it's not uncommon in Western big game hunting to spend, hours and hours a day behind your binoculars. And then, mounting those on a tripod will make a tremendous difference to you. I remember my oldest brother, Todd, who I grew up hunting with, it's probably been, maybe 18, 20 years ago. He's like, hey, you should try mounting your binoculars on a tripod. And I was like, what? I can sit and glass off my knees. And he's like, no, I'm serious. You should put them on this tripod, and you're going to be just blown away with the amount of stuff that you see. And unequivocally, that thing, mounting your binoculars on a tripod will change your life for Western big game hunting. So, optics, I feel like, they're expensive. I'm not going to lie. When you look at a Vortex, some of those upper ends, or a Leica or Swarovski or Zeiss, it's a pretty significant investment. But I think it's one of the best investments you can make. It's a quality piece of gear that if you buy it, you'll probably have it for, I'm still using a pair of Leica binoculars that, I conned my wife into burning our tax return when we were going to college on a pair of Leicas. and I'm still using them, you know. So yeah, good glass I think is super important. Then kind of along the same lines of you know, I think a good pack and good boots. You know, good clothing is important. It'll help you out. I don't know that it's like, you know, the first thing, but I would say good boots, good pack, good optics. And then I typically tell people the other thing, like as part of your camp system, if you're looking to do, you know, backpack hunting, it's really tough to beat a good sleeping bag, you know, and a lot of the really good sleeping bags, whether you're talking, you know, Marvin makes a great bag, Western Mountaineering, you know, Feathered Friends, there's, you know, Stone Glacier. There's some other companies out there that make really good bags, but that's another product that, like, if you buy and you take care of, you're going to have that thing for 25 or 30 years. You know, I've got a couple of Western Mountaineering bags that I've had for 15 years, and you know, they're like new. I wash them a couple times a year, and those things are just money. Every time I need them, you know, they deliver. So that's kind of my piece of advice, I would say.
Yeah, no, that's a good piece of advice. And what I've learned too is, like, up front, you know, I probably spent more than I needed to get, you know, gear for the first hunt, but overall I just kept building it year after year. And like when I went on my elk hunt last year, I didn't need anything. Like I upgraded things because I wanted to try them or something, but I didn't need anything. So that helps, you know. Then, you know, your first hunt might be a little more of an investment, but as I can promise you that, well, for most people, you're going to want to go back again, and it becomes easier once you kind of have that gear build up, and you know, I mean, you can definitely, you know, whatever it takes to get the tags and go, definitely. But if there is a possibility of buying the quality stuff like you were mentioning, it is nice that it lasts year after year, and you know, it is an investment.
Yeah, and I feel like, you know, boots are obviously, nothing can ruin your hunt more than sore feet, you know. Like if your feet hurt, if you got bad blisters, you know, either your heels or your pinky toes, and it eats those up, I mean, that can ruin your day in a heartbeat, ruin your whole trip. So good boots are a must. I mean, we already talked about a pack. You know, sleeping bags could keep you alive, you know.
Yeah.
You might need that for survival. You know, another piece of gear that I didn't even mention, but I think is super handy, that's just, you know, recently to the market, maybe last 7 or 8 years or so, are these little satellite messengers. So Garmin makes this one called an Inreach, and they make an Inreach Explorer and an Inreach Mini, and then they have a new one called the 66i, which is, you know, has aerial imagery and all that. But man, those can give you so much peace of mind, you know, just being able to keep in touch with you know, friends and family at home. And I remember I went on a hunt. It was actually that same hunt in Wyoming, and you know, I had a spot, which at the time was a great little unit. You know, you could essentially had a SOS button, and then it also had a button that you could send that just said "I'm okay." You know, which is great because my wife and my kids always knew that I was okay, but like I didn't have any interaction with them. You know, so I had no idea what was going on with them. But you know, these new Inreaches, they're awesome because it's just like being able to send and receive text messages. So, you know, you can keep in touch with home. And if you should ever get in a real bad bind, it's cool that those have those little SOS features that, you know, people can come in and help you out, which is cool.
Yeah, the Inreach Mini, I bought that a couple years ago. I was working for a bow shop, and we became a Garmin dealer, and I picked one up, and they are so nice, so handy to have. You know, this past year, I used it. My buddy that I was hunting with, that actually I'll be going to Alaska with, he had an Inreach, so I texted him. He was elk hunting in a different, he was in a different spot, so I texted him when I shot my bull, you know, that it bull down, and was able to send the location right to him. And then him and my cousin came up to help pack out the bull. Like otherwise, that would have never happened. Never would have been able to get a hold of them, you know?
Yeah. I've done the same thing. I've been able to text my buddy, and he's been able to call a packer and give them my GPS locations based off of, you know, the information I sent him. You know, the packer pulls up his GPS, plugs in my coordinates, and comes in on horses the next day and gets me out, you know? So
yeah,
that stuff is that stuff is invaluable. Those are awesome.
Yeah, for sure. And Trail, on a side note, as we were sitting here talking, I looked out my window of my office at my house, and like right outside the window, about 5 feet, there was a fawn, a little deer was just standing out there, just in the middle of the day in the yard.
Right on.
Yeah, I just thought that was kind of funny, but
that's fantastic.
Yeah, that's a nice thing of kind of living in the middle of nowhere here. I got deer in the yard all the time, so that's nice.
Yeah.
So
yeah, no, that's awesome.
So has everything with COVID affected any of your hunting plans for this year?
Not as of yet. I'm worried just because it seems like there's more states that are kind of, getting back into maybe locking things down a little bit. I hope it doesn't go to, further, and I'm hoping it doesn't restrict travel or anything like that. But, yeah, so far, everything, I didn't have any plans to head to, Alaska or anywhere. I've got a bunch of tags. I have a bunch of tough tags, so it's going to be, I'm going to have to work pretty hard and have some luck too to have some success this year. But, yeah, it'll be a full fall. It's just I'm gonna have to work pretty hard to find some success.
Yeah. What kind of hunts do you have planned?
Yeah, so I've got an archery deer tag here in Utah, just on a general season unit. It's not a unit that I've hunted before, but it's a unit that's relatively close to my house, and which has been super cool because I've been getting up every morning and running out. It's close enough that I can get it out and glass until about 8 or 8:30 and still make it to work by 9. So I think, I don't know, maybe the last week or so I've been out every morning looking for deer, which has been pretty fun. So I've got that archery deer tag. It's just a general season tag, but general season deer hunting in Utah is still pretty good, I think if I'm lucky that I live close enough that I think, if I scout pretty hard, I think I can do quite well. But it's like I said, it's still a general season tag. It's going to take some hard work and some luck. But I've got that, and then I've got a archery antelope tag in Wyoming. We've got an intern that works here. Her name is Jill, and she works on our content team, and she's never killed anything with a bow. I think she's 19, so it's kind of funny, but she was looking for an opportunity to go bow hunting, and I had some points in Wyoming, and I had a unit that I always wanted to hunt, and she wanted to go hunt, and so we decided we're gonna film a hunt. So she and I are gonna go up there and archery hunt pronghorn, which will be pretty fun, and I'm actually super excited about that. I'm looking forward to that. It'll be a lot of fun. So spot and stock antelope, or it may end up doing some sitting in a blind, but you ever antelope hunted?
No, I haven't.
Yeah, you got to get into that. I know it seems like, they're a small animal and there's not nearly as much bone on, horn growth on their head as like a mule deer, an elk, or a whitetail. But man, they're cool. I promise. I think you'll get hooked.
Yeah. Well, last year my brother drew a tag in Wyoming, and he went up by himself, and he shot a buck there right after I shot my elk, and I met up with him and got to see it, and he was telling me about it, and he's like, he used a rifle, and he said it was amazing. He's like, this unit that he drew didn't take a lot of points or anything. He's like, I didn't run into any other hunters, didn't have any issue. He went up and scouted because he lives out in Colorado, so he drove up and scouted and found this buck, and didn't expect to actually shoot that one. That wasn't his goal, but he ended up shooting it, and he said it was so cool, and he's going back again this year for it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they're neat. I think they're one of the prettiest animals that we have out west. They're real colorful. They're pretty. They're tons of fun to hunt. Wyoming, like if you want to bow hunt them, you can literally, bow hunt all day long. You can blow stock after stock after stock just because there's so many of them, and it's an action-packed hunt and a ton of fun. So I would say if you haven't done that, I'd put it on your list because those are super fun hunts. But I've got that, and then I've got an elk tag, an archery elk tag in Colorado. we're gonna film another hunt. There's another guy that works here, Chris Neville. He and I are gonna go and do a hunt. I think we're probably gonna leave maybe the 14th or so and try to hunt through about the 25th. And then let's see. Oh, my kid, my 15-year-old. I took him out hunting this last year, and he shot a cow elk. And while we were sitting there watching this little herd of elk come out, and he he picked out this elk and shot it. And in the meantime, we had another little 5-point, probably like a 3-year-old 5-point bull come out below us, and he got to sit there and watch it through his binoculars, and he was just so excited. And he was like, "Oh, that bull is a giant," and he was so stoked. And so I asked him this year, "What do you want to hunt?" And he said, "Oh, I would love to hunt a bull elk." And so I've been buying him points and building points in Colorado. So he actually has a first season bull tag for rifle over there, which is just a 5-day hunt, but they still should be rutting a little bit. So I'm super excited for that hunt. And then, finally, I've got a late season archery bull tag in Arizona, which is a tough hunt again. I've done that one a couple of times, and I killed one the first time, and then the second time I did it, I just didn't come together. And then I've got another permit, so we'll see how that one goes. It's fun because you see a lot of elk, but it's really tough because it's just so thick and really rough country.
Is that a tough to draw tag?
No, it's actually pretty easy. So there's quite a few of those late archery bull tags in Arizona are still relatively easy to draw. And, they have low success. They're typically like 10% or less on the harvest success. And it's a tough hunt, but it does give you the opportunity to hunt some, really good units where there's some great genetics and some great bulls. It's just tough to fill your tag because it's so thick. 2 years ago when I had this tag, I hunted for, I want to say 8 or 9 days, and I found a bull like on day 7 that I wanted to hunt and kill, and I had him within range 2 different times. In fact, I was like 32 yards the first time, and I was within 40 the second time. And both times he just basically stood up there and looked at me like, what are you going to do? You're not going to thread this needle. It's too thick. And he was right.
I guess I didn't. When I think of Arizona, I don't think of that. I think of more open country and stuff, and that's from me never being there. But that's crazy.
Yeah, there's parts of that central Arizona, and then even into the southern end of the state. But really, that central part, it's thick. There's some areas of that that's just so choked out with undergrowth and brush. It can be. It's great for elk. It's good habitat, especially in the winter. But it makes it dang tough to bow hunt.
Have you ever done that late season mule deer hunt in Arizona?
I have. Yeah, I've gone down and done javelina, so linked it in with the javelina hunt and done late archery deer, and that's a ton of fun. Yeah, you can chase 3 and 4 point desert mule deer all day, or there's some really decent coos deer, and you lump that in with the javelina hunt, and it's a ton of fun. Yeah, that's a fun hunt.
I got a buddy of mine who just texted me a couple days ago, and he lives in Wyoming, but he's like, "Hey, I got this." He goes, "I'm gonna hunt over the counter mule deer Arizona in January." He's like, "You should come with me." He's like, "I think it's gonna be a fun hunt," and that's one of those ones that I definitely have on the list along with so many other things.
Sure. Yeah. No, that one's fun. You'll see a ton of deer. It's kind of fun because those coos bucks are rutting in January. Same with the muleys; they're rutting a little bit, and it's action packed. You can get in a stalk every day, and you'll see a pile of deer. It's a fun hunt. That used to be back before I worked here. That was a hunt that I would love to do, but it's just gotten so busy in January now that I can't really peel off that time of year to go hunt. But I would say go do it.
Yeah. Well, that's good advice. Like I said, there's so many hunts I want to do, and it seems like there's not enough time in the year.
Sure. Yeah, I agree, especially in the fall.
Yeah, oh, yeah. Especially like when it comes to like say elk hunting, and I like to bow hunt for the most part. So it's like trying to there's only one September, and it's only 30 days long, so it's difficult. But I think here in the next year I should start drawing some decent tags. I've never drawn any tags as far as it's all been over the counter to this point out west, but I'm looking forward to starting to draw some tags. Like I said, I've been I kind of what I did was I went on GoHunt and started looking for places and basically went through as if I had unlimited points anywhere and kind of picked places I wanted to go, and then kind of set goals of short term, mid-term, and long-term goals, and then built like a strategy together. I have a whole spreadsheet broke down, and I seem to just keep adding to it and to get to buy points and stuff.
Yeah, no, but that's the way to do it, man. Break it down, and you're exactly right, man. Long term, short term, and then kind of opportunity. And once you kind of dive into the data and you start looking at the application strategy articles and the odds of things, a lot of that is really apparent. I mean, there's states where it makes sense that it's got to be long term just based on the draw and the type of hunt that they provide. And there's some states, maybe, Colorado, that you can build a few points, maybe 1 to 6 or 7 and go on a hunt. And then in the meantime, you can hunt over the counter if you want to. There's definitely states where it makes sense to build, and there's definitely some states where you build a few and go hunting every few years. And then, you got states like New Mexico or Idaho, where it's completely random draw. And, I don't apply in Idaho every year because you have to buy the hunting license in order to apply, and it can be kind of expensive. But New Mexico, I think, is the state you ought to throw your name in the ring every year because you never know. And you could draw a really killer tag.
Yeah. That's New Mexico's. I've been applying the last couple of years for that, and I kind of shoot for the fences with it. I've been, I have other plans of places kind of, in my head. Then I'm like, what, I want to if I can draw one of these really good tags, I definitely go there. I mean, it's possible. I mean. I've seen where you've hunted, in New Mexico before, and a few years ago. My dad and his buddy's been trying to get him to go out and do a late season mule deer hunt in January, and one of those units up along the Colorado border with super low success as far as with drawing a tag. And his first year they drew it, so it was it's a luck of the draw.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I mean, it's just like you're saying, you never know if you don't apply. So, I mean, I apply where it makes sense. And, really Western big game hunting, it's just like you're saying, it takes planning and preparation years in advance to make a hunt happen, I mean, it's just like the permit that my kid drew, I've been buying him points since he was eligible. And, finally this year, he's 15 and I have enough points that I can put him in and take him on a really fun hunt. So yeah, apply where it makes sense and plan and do the work, man. It sounds like you're well on your way. So that's cool.
Yeah. And one thing you said there that I think's really important, and, you'll know a lot better than I will, but like, just as far as with the whole game of getting into Western hunting, and it's something that definitely takes time and planning, and not all of us have unlimited budgets. We don't have unlimited time, and it's you just got to plan it. And ever since I've started doing that, it's kind of I feel like it's helped me in all aspects of life from a planning side of things. And because I've been, ever since my first year, I've been going on a Western hunt of some sort every year. So I'm always, keeping up with, my physical fitness and, just planning things. And it keeps you really organized. And when you have those types of goals like that, I feel like it goes out into other things, from whether it's my, my day job or doing with the East Meets West and the business there, like everything. I feel like it's just helped me in so many different ways.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's become more of a lifestyle. I mean, I know, and I'm not speaking for you per se, but for me, I know that, it is my job, and it's what I deal with every single day, whether it's, looking at the data and the research side of it, or whether from looking for hunting gear. So, that is part of my job. But yeah, that lifestyle, like planning for, the fall, it, bled into all parts of my life,
Yeah.
I'm the same, I'm not, I follow you on Instagram. It looks like you hit a fair more of the weights, and the curls than I do, but, I still run, quite a bit and try to keep my fitness up. But you're right. A lot of that is just so that I can, be a better hunter in the fall.
Yeah. And there's one difference there too, is, you get to play in the mountains a little bit more. So you got real world experience.
Yeah.
Mine, I'm trying to create it.
Right.
So
yeah, I'd be curious. Did when you first started coming out, what did the elevation do? How was it?
Oh, it put me down pretty hard. I remember getting out at a rest stop in Colorado. It was somewhere along 70 there where it was higher elevation, and I got out to go walk to the restroom, and I was like out of breath, and I'm like, this isn't good. And it's definitely the elevation definitely affected me quite a bit. And the more I've helped with my cardio side of things here, it seems to help. And then there's also things like I take some of the Mountain Ops altitude pills before I go out, like 3 to 5 days in advance, and that seemed to help a little bit. And and then also I try to plan my hunts that I can, the first day or day and a half, I can kind of go easy to get used to it, and kind of wean my way into it. Do you live at elevation, or do you still kind of deal with that a little bit yourself?
Yeah, I live at about 5,700 feet. So I'm kind of, I guess for you, I would say, yeah, I live at elevation, but within, 20 minutes I can be at 10,000 feet, just go up the canyon. The other day, a buddy and I, we took off here and went up the mountain, and we just ran a trail that goes up here, and he and I were both kind of noticing how much winded we felt. And we were probably 9,500 feet, but, yeah, I try to do mostly trail runs, and, I do try to get up in elevation. And, when I'm scouting, a lot of that is up in elevation, 8,500, 9,500, even up into like 10,000 feet. So I am fortunate, but I was curious on how that would affect you.
Oh yeah, it definitely does. And my buddy that I hunt with, he actually had to go to the hospital in New Mexico. He was on a mule deer hunt, and he was up around 13,000 feet, and he went right there. Drove from 1,500 feet in Pennsylvania drove straight out, and then hiked right up in and got really sick, and they ended up having to take him to the hospital, and he was really bad. His blood oxygen level was so low. They said some people, if he would have been out of shape, would have probably died from it, and said that he couldn't go back to elevation. And it was just, so it's a serious thing. And I feel like it affects everyone a little bit differently.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And there's good info kind of buried in what we're talking about. So I would say, it sounds like the better your cardio is, that's going to help. And then, typically try to arrive a day or two early. And if you can, very gently ease yourself into the elevation, I think it will help. Yeah,
I agree with that statement there. That's just, it's something that it took me a little bit to figure out myself. I was just out in Colorado beginning of the month visiting my brother, and I went out with my girlfriend, and she seemed unfazed by the altitude, where even, for me, it took me a little bit. I was breathing heavily when we were hiking and doing some stuff there where, I guess it just depends. And you don't want to, if you can, add those couple extra days on the front end of the trip to get yourself acclimated, because otherwise, if you put yourself down, even I think it was in 2018, I even knew that. So I'd hunted for a couple years out there, and first day I went out with my dad and we just started hiking, and I think we did like a 12-mile day the first day, and I got really sick. and had a bad headache and it was really difficult. And of course, my dad being a lot older than me, he still kicked my ass when it came to doing that. He was unfazed by it, but yeah.
Some people are just tougher, man. I
what
get
it is. I'm not arguing that at all.
Yeah, I have a similar. I'll just share it real quick. But I had a mountain lion tag that I'd drawn, and I went with a buddy of mine who I've known forever. He's just an old cowboy. I mean, and he told me, yeah, if you turn a lion track up, we'll go out and we'll run lion. And he's got mules and stuff. We'll spend the day and we'll run the lion. And so I found a big track, called him up. I sent him a picture of it. And he was like, yeah, I'll be there. So we ran this lion the whole next day, but just kind of along the same lines as what you're talking about. I mean, this guy was, in his 50s at the time. I was in my early 30s, and I was running a lot. I was in really good shape. And I remember we got down into this canyon, and super steep, super rocky. Couldn't even take the mules down in there. And I remember we hiked down in there, and coming out of the canyon, I couldn't keep up with the guy. And the guy was wearing leather chaps, like riding chaps, and cowboy boots, Wranglers, and a denim shirt. And we got to the top of the hill, and that guy looked like, I looked like I was going to die. Like I was sweating, and I was in really good shape. And this guy is just like, what's going on? Are you going to be okay? And that's the only thing I can figure is that this guy was just a heck of a lot tougher. He was just more Western than I was, I guess. But yeah, Wranglers and chaps just flat out hiked me.
That's so funny. I met a cowboy in the backcountry in Colorado, was a couple years ago, and he knew the friends that I went hunting with, their family had been hunting this place for years and years, and they knew this guy, and he came in on his horse, and he was, at night, we were sitting there getting ready to go to bed, and he's drinking whiskey out of the bottle, and he'll get up and hike in the morning, and same thing, like jeans, and I'm like, man, this guy is just tough. There's no other way to explain that. I don't feel like it's any more comfortable for him. He just knows how to deal with it better.
Just mentally tougher.
Yes.
I think you're right.
Yeah.
That's funny.
So with so it's kind of talking about, you have this over the counter. I think you had said the elk hunt that you're going on with Chris. That's an over the counter tag.
It was an over the counter unit last year. This year they changed it to a draw, but we drew it as a second choice, and there's piles of leftover permits for it.
Okay, so with a hunt like that, that's over the counter, easy to draw or anything, when you're going into that, what are some of the things that you're thinking of, or what goes into some of your planning to do that? Because I feel like, a lot of the people as they're getting into it are going to be doing these over the counter tags in places like Colorado. What are some of the key things that you're kind of looking at going into it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it starts even a little bit before that in trying to pick the area. And I talk to people all the time that'll call up. And in fact, I've talked to one guy, many times he'll call up and just kind of try to pick my brain on what area to hunt. And we talked through different scenarios and stuff. And it can seem, overwhelming. And I can see how people get buried in trying to pick a unit. For me, what I start looking at, especially if I'm looking for an opportunity to hunt like this one that's either easy to draw or I can pick up over the counter, I start looking at things like harvest success. So I think, a lot of people say well, harvest success isn't important to me. I'm one of those, 10%ers that fills my tag every year, which is great. But for me, I think it tells a story, So if I'm looking at the number of hunters surveyed, and I can see that harvest success is, maybe it's stayed relatively the same, or maybe it's peaked or, dipped or whatever. But I do look at harvest success. So for example, the unit I'm looking at has a pretty solid trend, that 10 to 12% range. And more interestingly, is that, they typically survey 1,000 plus hunters out of there. Well, that means they're killing, 100 plus bulls out of there every year on the archery hunt. So there's there's obviously a plenty elk, right? There's a pretty decent herd of elk in there if they're killing 100 bulls every year. It's okay that there's a lot of pressure for me. I don't mind that too much, especially in this unit or any unit, because I'm going to start looking at things like wilderness. So, how much space is there? How much, if I'm able and willing to outwork somebody else, can I find some distance away from other people? So I start looking at things like wilderness, remote areas. I'm looking at harvest success. And then, once I get the tag, I'm going to start looking more intently at that unit and kind of picking it apart with a map. So, I may start looking at things like burn layers. So I want to look at the fire history in the unit. Elk are just, they're like flies to a burn area. They flock to it. So if you've got a burn area that's maybe 2 or 3 years old, even up to maybe 5, 6, 7 years old, the feed in there is going to be exceptional. It's going to come back, and it's like ice cream to elk. So they're going to be in that country. So I start looking at burn areas. The other thing I like about hunting burn areas is that, it's more open generally, right? So I love a burn area. If it's like 2 to 3 years old and there's still a bunch of standing dead, I love that country because I can still see elk through it, but I still have enough cover that I can close the distance, so I can be within 80, 100 yards, and I can see the elk, but I can still use some of those standing dead to close the distance and get a shot. It opens up those shooting alleys as well, which I really like. So I'm looking at burned areas. I'm looking at water. So elk is, they need water every single day. They're a big animal. So I'm looking for things like wet meadows and springs, anywhere I can find like little benches in the topography that have got some wet meadows or areas. That's typically a spot I want to check out for elk. I'm looking for nice mosaics. So elk, deer, even antelope, I guess, a little bit to a lesser extent, but they love mosaic-y habitats. So, a lot of edge. So if you've got a lot of cover and you've got adjacent feeding areas and you've got a lot of edge, a nice mosaic habitat, that can typically be, a magnet to elk and deer because they want to have, areas to feed and then areas to get back into cover. Elk love those big north-facing slopes that are dark timber for bedding areas. So I'm going to start looking at those types of things. But yeah, I'm going to start picking apart the maps and the landscape, and pretty soon, I'm going to have a plan together based on what I think the habitat's going to give me. So yeah, that's kind of my first step.
Yeah, and one of the things that you had said there, Trail, was like, you're talking about those edges, and this I try to relate things back to, with whitetails, a lot of people to think about. So where I hunt in the Appalachian region, it's a lot of big timber. It's not ag country, but anywhere I can find a lot of diversity in that type of timber, whether that's, logging cuts, whether it's pine thickets, hemlocks, anything that creates that diversity, like you're saying, is a magnet for whitetails too. So like there's a lot of things that can be applied that people are hunting here to out there. And I can't speak as much on the western side of things, but it seems like there's some crossover there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. I think you're spot on. I'm the opposite of you. I've only hunted whitetail the one time, but I would think it translates across different species. Elk, deer, coos deer, mule deer. They love those edges, and typically the more mosaic and breakup that you've got, the better.
Yeah, I like that. So all right, so now you have that was a high level overview of your kind of plan. So you're heading in. What are you doing to, like, when you're going in for the hunt? What's kind of going through your head? Say you go in and you're not finding elk. What are you doing then? Like what does that look like?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I think it's important to kind of have a plan together. Loosely, like, hey, I want to hunt this drainage or this area, and I want to check it out first and foremost. And you're gonna need to plan to get into that area. So if you need to find a trailhead or trails or whatever your means is of getting in there, whether there's roads, whatever it might be. But I'll typically start with an area, and I'll have areas, A, B, C, and D, and kind of on down the list as backups. But once I get up in the area, I think your timing, you got to think about timing. So a little bit is going to depend on when you hunt. Like for us, an example, I think your best bet for finding bulls in the rut is typically that like 15th through the 25th window of September. You may be kind of on the front end, and maybe they're going to rut late one year, or they may rut early. They might be rutting like the 8th or 9th or 10th of the month. But typically, I think if you're in the elk woods between the 15th of September and the 25th is your best chance to get into some rutting action. So, picking your dates. If you've got an earlier hunt than that, say you want to hunt the 1st through the 10th of September, you might try some different tactics, whether that's like finding wallows and sitting them or spot and stock. But you got to think about timing. Once I'm in there and I get in there, I'm not a huge caller. I'm not a good elk caller. I just flat out am not. I don't spend a lot of time practicing it. I can cow call and I can locate bugle, and typically I'll carry a bugle and I'll just, send out a bugle and try to get a response. From that point, I don't make a lot of noise unless it's cow call. And my preferred method is I like to follow along with the herd. I like to get in tight before I have to cow call. And if I can bugle just enough to keep a bull going so that I know where he's at, that's kind of my preferred method of hunting elk. And then I guess something that I should say is, like, if I'm not finding elk, there's so many, I feel like there's a lot of people, they go into an area, they have expectations of what a hunt's going to be like, and they get into an area and it's not what they thought, and I feel like they get so let down that they kind of give up on it. And the biggest piece of advice I could give to people, Western big game hunters in general is, and the guys that I know that produce every single year, the biggest difference is they're just willing to put the time in, and they stick with it. So that's my biggest piece of advice is, if you're not finding elk, have a backup plan and head towards that area and check that out. And if that doesn't work, have another plan. So, stay mobile, cover country, use your tools, use a bugle to locate, use your binos to locate elk. But don't give up until you find what you're looking for, and then stick with it.
Yeah, that's a great piece of advice, and it's funny, I get to talk to a bunch of different people on here, and I think the common thread between people that are, consistently successful is that just putting in the work and the time. When things aren't going right, just keep working at it. And it's so easy to, especially, for me, like my first year out there, like after like 5 days, I was like, I'm ready to go. Like I wasn't, finding anything we did at the beginning. And then it was like a struggle and, through time kind of learned a little bit of that. Just, it definitely takes time. I think that's a really, solid, I guess, piece of advice there for anyone. I mean, that's if there's one thing that I've heard from listeners of the podcast or friends or anything that have went out there, it's like finding elk seems to be the toughest part. Right? I don't know about the toughest, but it seems to be the most common thing that people are struggling with is, locating elk in general.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it can be tough, especially over the counter units. They're smart, and they seek cover, and they may be really call shy. I would say cover ground. Like I said, the more prepared you go into that hunt, the better you're off going to be. So if you've got, backup plans to your initial plan that you think is your best, you've got plan A, B, C, D, and, on down the line, and just start working through those, have those in your back pocket and be mobile. It's actually one of the reasons I'm a big fan of, being, a mobile elk camp. So, I do a lot of baby hunting, and I know that, there's a lot of really well-known people in the industry that are kind of saying, that don't do it that way, set up a base camp. You don't want to carry your pack everywhere you go, but For me, I would say that a big part of the success that I've had is being mobile. So, everything on my back every day, and just moving, basin hopping. Elk are big. I killed a bull in New Mexico. It's been probably 5 years ago. I stayed with this one bull for probably 5 days, and he had a really unique bugle, which was great because I could hear him and I knew it was him. But from the point where I first picked him up to where I eventually killed him was probably, 7 or 8 miles. And, he was just moving country with his cows. And, if I'd been trying to go back and forth between like a base camp and trying to hunt and kill him, I'd have walked my legs off. For me, it was a whole lot easier. And I had probably, 2 or 3 close calls with that bull, either, right at first light or right before dark, that I wouldn't have got if I was trying to either make it to him or back to camp. So I'm a big fan of mobile, being mobile when you're hunting elk. Yeah,
no, that's solid. And like you said, and again, from, interviewing a lot of people, there seems to be so many different, strategies. There's, a bunch of different ways to skin the cat, but I mean, that totally makes sense. And I'm sure, too, when you say either you or another hunter, which is probably going to happen with an over-the-counter unit, spooks them out. They might, move quite a ways. And if you're able to just chase after them and not being like, oh, I gotta walk all the way back to my truck tonight, or I gotta walk back to this base camp, then you're more apt to probably chase after them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And I would say, you got to be smart when you're hunting like that. I mean, you can't just, willy-nilly walk around with, the wind at your back and blowing into different drainages and stuff. You have to kind of plan your routes and kind of plan as you're hunting that way. But I mean, for me, unequivocally, I can tell you that I've been more successful since I started hunting that way.
Yeah. Oh, that's great. So is there anything else, if there's like one piece of advice you could give? I mean, you already have, but anything else you can think of that you want to give the listeners as far as a piece of advice for elk hunting or Western hunting in general? Because then after that, I'm going to ask you about your whitetail experience.
Yeah. I would say, my number one tip is just don't give up. I like to tell people that I have a weak mind and a strong back, I just, don't overthink it, and don't give up. Just stay with it. So stay with it and don't give up and go for it. And then, I think the other piece of advice is something I've been thinking about a ton lately is, I talked to a lot of people that'll say, oh, I had a great hunt, but the shot presented itself and I didn't make the shot. I missed. I either shot high or, I got buck fever and totally whiffed it. But I would say do as much prep, especially if you're bow hunting, because when a bull elk or, probably in your experience, when a big, whitetail comes walking under your tree stand, that feeling can be overwhelming. It can be just almost make all your extremities numb, right? Just blackout. I've got a buddy that'll tell you he completely blacks out. He's like, I don't even remember seeing my pins,
Mm-hmm.
So I would say do as much work in that regard leading up to your hunt as you can. So, shoot every single day. I can tell you, from my standpoint, I had a real bad case of target panic, shooting an index finger release it's been probably 10 years ago or so. And, I switched over to shooting a hinge release, a back tension release, which took completely retraining my whole shot process. But I can tell you absolutely, I've made shots with my bow that I wouldn't have made otherwise, because I kind of relearned that technique. And I've told this story before, and I apologize if you heard it, but I remember drawing on a bull in Wyoming a number of years ago, and he walked out at 55 yards, and he was standing there completely broadside, and I'm at full draw. And I remember the pins, gapped. I had a 50 and 60, gapped on his side right where I wanted to hit. And I remember just like my brain is just like screaming at me, just like, shoot now, shoot now. Because you always think like, if I don't shoot right this very second, this opportunity is gonna, I'm gonna miss it, right? Like I have to shoot right this second. And I remember just, my mind is screaming at me to dump the string, but I didn't, because I've been relearned, the shot process, learned to shoot with tension and learned to execute a shot. And I remember just like, it just went, and all of a sudden it went, and it was like a nice surprise release. It went off, and like I 12 roomed that bull. He went over and died about 40 yards. But I know absolutely, like if I would have had a trigger, like I would have melted in that moment. Like I would have punched the trigger. And whether you shoot an index finger release, I would say do some work now on your mental management of that moment, so that when the actual shot presents itself, that you can make the shot.
Yeah. That's so, and yeah, how many times have you heard, and I've experienced it myself, the blackout phase, and I, correct me if I'm wrong, but did you write an article for GoHunt on this?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah. I've written some. I think Brady's written some on Target Panic as well, but I mean, there's so many what ifs, right? Like, or what might have been, with people, that have missed animals and that's actually, I would say that's bled over into a lot of things. Like I feel like I'm a better shot with a muzzleloader. I'm a better shot with a rifle because of, kind of relearn that process.
Yeah. And so I remember reading that multiple times, and Brady's, that was the first time I had Brady on the podcast, was the beginning of last summer. I was struggling with it to a point where I couldn't even shoot my bow to target anymore. I was struggling during hunting season. I was shooting an index finger, and I bought a thumb trigger, and I was like, I was struggling with, I'd be good, and then I wasn't, I was really struggling with it. And so between, Brady, your article, and then other people that have helped me, I had a bunch of people that helped me with it, kind of retrain. I literally didn't, I took the sight off my bow for a while in practice. I bought a back tension release, and then retrained myself, watched videos, did everything I could to just kind of get my mind right, not focusing on that pin. Then I put it back on, and I didn't actually, which was cutting it close, but I never started actually shooting targets and shooting, 3D again until almost August. And just because I was just practicing, I just go out and shoot a ton of arrows at, point blank range, just practicing, executing. And that, then fast forward, I ended up getting to a point where I felt comfortable. I wanted to hunt with my thumb button and, train myself to hunt with that and use tension to activate it. And on my elk, you can actually see it in the video, the hunt, because the camera guy, Justin, was right over my shoulder. And you can see I was still shaking. I was not, I wouldn't say that I was like purposely calm, but that shot broke as perfect as it could possibly break. And it was a 60-yard shot, and it hit exactly where I wanted it to. And I can almost guarantee you I would have screwed that up if I wouldn't have went through the process of kind of retraining my mind and practicing that,
right.
Because, think about it. You're putting in all this work for that one moment, and if you can't hold it together at that point, then you're kind of screwed, and all that work wasn't, what'd you do it for?
Yeah. You can have all the gear, and you can be in the best shape of your life, and you can do all the work to put yourself into that position. But like, if you can't execute that shot every single time, then what are you doing? So I would say, put the time and effort into it. And I love the fact, because that's exactly how it felt like to me. It's not that you're not excited. It's not that you don't get buck fever, because I still do. Like I get buck fever, probably worse. Like I still get so excited when that moment's going to come. It's just, you've done so many repetitions and you've done it that way. It's not like you can just punch that trigger. That the muscle memory kind of takes over. And I know for a fact that like since I made that switch, and like I said, I think it's been maybe 10 years ago, but I've definitely been way more successful.
Yeah,
that'd be my tip. That was a long-winded tip. Sorry.
No, that's good. That's really, really great advice. It's like I said, that was I relate to it so much because of the personal experience I had with it. But man, is that a big deal being able to execute it, and it's helped me, even for whitetails and everything else. And I think for me, it's just the confidence that I have now. Like when I put the pin there, I'm expecting it to hit where I am aiming, not wanting it to, or not praying that it does.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Knowing it, rather than just hoping.
Yeah, definitely. So I want to ask you about, you said you went on, one whitetail hunt. And if I remember right, when we were emailing, you said you did that last year, correct?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Let's hear a little bit about that whitetail hunt and your kind of experience going from west to east.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so that was another one of those hunts where I met a guy. I was at the APA show, and I popped by the Matthews booth when you got the Mission Archery and Matthews right there together. I started talking to a guy. His name's Ben Shell, and he works for Matthews there. He's an area rep. I just started talking to him and said, I'd never been whitetail hunting, but that I wanted to go. And, it was probably like a 15-minute conversation. We swapped information. And, I swear, like Midwesterners, Easterners, you guys are you're so much more friendly and outgoing than us Westerners, because he invited me out. I mean, he made it happen. He said, I've got this piece of property that my father-in-law farms. It's got some river bottom country. It's there in Sparta, Wisconsin. Come out and stay with me and go whitetail hunting for a week. And I was like, sure, yeah, I'd love to, And so that's essentially how it happened. I mean, I flew in and he picked me up from the airport. He, took me out to eat that night with his wife and a buddy and his wife, and we kind of just shot the bull. He let me stay in his basement there at his house, and I came home. I've told people here that I work with, and I've told my wife, I was just like, man, I need to be a much better person, because like I'm seriously getting, this guy was the nicest guy in the world to me. But yeah, it was fun. Like I love ambush style hunting, so like sitting in a tree stand or sitting in a blind. Sitting on a wall or something like that for elk. I love that type of hunting. I don't mind it at all. Sitting from dark to dark, it doesn't faze me one bit. So I love that kind of stuff. It was interesting to me is, when I talked to him on the phone, he said, hey, be prepared for cold temperatures. And I said, well, how cold? And he's like, oh, it could be in the 20s or, maybe into the teens, which I'm thinking that's pretty cold. But, I've done 20 degrees, I've backpacked in 20 degrees, been fine. And the one thing I know for sure is that like Midwestern or Eastern cold is not the same as Western cold. You guys have got, you've got that moisture in the air and the wind chill, and it's a heck of a lot colder. So, I remember, every layer I had, basically, I packed sitting in a tree stand to stay in the tree stand. So, didn't anticipate that, but, yeah, it was awesome. My hunt had, I want to say 3 or 4 days. The action, it was the first part of November. It was pretty slow. I didn't see many deer, although there were tracks everywhere. He ended up moving me over into another stand and had a buck come through. And it was the first buck I'd seen. And, I was just so juiced and so excited. So I arrowed it and ended up killing it. But it was probably 2, maybe 3-year-old. I was probably a 2-year-old. I was trying to make it a 3-year-old. It's a 2-year-old, I'm sure. But yeah, just awesome. I loved it. I had a blast, and I love that country. I would love to do more whitetail hunting.
Yeah. Well, one hunt I think that you would like is the style of hunting that I do here. It's big timber. I always, the way I explain it to people, it's a combination of Western hunting a little bit with whitetail hunting, where you're hiking in a ways, and I'm taking in. I've been hunting out of a saddle, and I take my tree sticks in and out almost every time, and I'm hanging on these these big ridges and the Appalachian Mountains and stuff, and it's really fun to get to do that. It's low deer density area, but you can really get some old deer, and in addition to that, I've also done some backpack hunts for whitetails, and that's really fun, because it's like I said, and part of my podcast and everything, it's like, all right, adventure is kind of yours to define with it. You can have that experience. Say you just had a kid, or you just got married and funds are tight or something, you can't go out west. You can take some of those things that you would have an experience out west and apply them anywhere in this Appalachian range. I mean, there's I did a rifle hunt last year. It was just a weekend, couple night thing, but backpacked in. I think we packed in like 2.5, 3 miles or so, and set up camp. I had my seek outside with a stove in it and everything, and it's just it can be a lot of fun, and it's just a completely different style of hunting.
Yeah, that would be fun. That sounds like fun, and I would totally. I mean, that sounds like a riot, and it's just fun. It's fun. It's probably the same experience for you. Coming out west, getting to hunt new environment, new country, new species. There's just that adventure that's in that. I mean, it's so much fun. The other thing that I kind of touched along the same lines of what you're talking about is, I talk to people all the time, and they'll say like, oh, I can't afford to, hunt out of state. The only opportunity I have is maybe here, close to home. But, some of my best hunts, some of the hunts that are like the most memorable for me is when I just had, I had like maybe 2 weeks of paid leave that I'd saved up, and I'd maybe lied to my boss and told him I was going to be sick for, a couple days of that to try to tack on. But, I maybe only had 2 weeks, and I had one tag that was just like a general season tag. But, I put a bunch of time in scouting, and I found, an animal to hunt, a buck to hunt. And the more time and effort I put into that, the more satisfaction I felt at the end of that hunt when it went my way. So, yeah, I mean, I tell people all the time, just because, you may not be able to hunt out of state doesn't mean that you can't have an adventure hunt, or you can't pour all your time and effort into, finding, a really mature old buck, and the satisfaction that you feel from having that come together is just, it's awesome. Some of my best hunts have been that type of hunting. Yeah. Adventure hunting and hunting for an older animal.
Yeah. For me here, I laugh, and, I get X amount of, days of vacation a year. That fluctuates a little bit, but I always spend at least a week hunting the Pennsylvania whitetail rut. And why don't there's bigger deer other places. There's all this stuff. I'm like, I just love it. It's one of those things that I can, I like hunting new places, and I do in Pennsylvania too, but I get the chance to scout them. I get the chance to try to figure them out. And that's a whole different style of adventure in its own. Like you were just saying about picking one buck and hunting them, same thing. And it's incredibly, fulfilling. And then when it does come together, it just makes it that much better.
Yeah. That's the part of whitetail hunting I think I could really get into, just because I've done it here in the past, not so much anymore, because I get spread out, I get my schedule spread out between multi-states and species and stuff, which is, it's fun too. But, I think for whitetail hunters, that's the part of that whole process that I could really get into, is just spending the time scouting and playing that chess match with an older age class buck and really figuring that out. And I mean, I think back, I killed a mule deer here in Utah. I think it's been in 2013, I think, but I hunted that buck for, I scouted all summer long. Saw him once, had a trail camera photo of him, but I hunted that buck for 17 days. And before I got a shot at it, and I was able to take him. But that experience is one of my most satisfying experiences in the woods, just of what it took, and just I have so much respect for that animal and that whole process. So yeah, don't overlook those close to home opportunities.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. So with you, you said you want to do it again. Are you gonna whitetail hunt this year?
I'm not this year just because I've got that late archery elk tag, which is in November in Arizona. But I want to do something, yeah, maybe 2021. I would love to do something like that late season.
Yeah. Yeah, I hear you. Yeah, whitetails are a cool animal. I mean, I was going to do it last year, and I'm still planning here in the next few years, but to hunt North Idaho whitetails, and do something different, just hunting different places. It's always a blast.
Yeah. Yeah, that would be fun. And Eastern hunting whitetail in the West, right?
Yep. Yeah.
I like it.
Cool. Well, Trail, I think we're going to end this episode here. I want to, thank you for coming on and talking to me here. I think this is a great conversation. And secondly, where can people find out some more stuff, some of the work that you've done, anything else, any plugs that you kind of want to give here?
Yeah. So, if you want to read some stuff that I've written, you can read it on just GoHunt's website. You can just do a quick Google search of Trail, which is just Trail, and then Kreitzer, Kreitzer, and then GoHunt. It'll bring up a list of articles that I've done. I've been writing for GoHunt. I freelance wrote for GoHunt for a number of years before I came on full time with them. So I got a bunch of stuff there, and then I'm on Instagram, just at Trail K11, and I'm on Facebook, I think, but I'm not on Facebook. But I haven't. If you want to follow me on Facebook, you might be disappointed. But yeah, I'm relatively active on Instagram.
Cool. Well, thank you again for coming on here. And I definitely, we talked about a little bit, it would need to be a whole separate episode, but I want to talk about your moose hunt at some point. So we're going to have to get you back on.
Yeah, I'd love to. That'd be awesome.
Cool. All right. Well, thanks, Trail. We'll talk to you later.
Yeah, you bet. Bye.
Thanks so much for listening to this episode of East Meets West Hunt with your host, Beau Martonik. For more great content and to stay up to date, visit eastmeetswesthunt.com, Facebook at East Meets West Outdoors, and Instagram at East Meets West Hunt. If you enjoyed today's episode, please review and subscribe, and we'll catch you next time.